Well, hello everyone. A warm welcome to the very first panel of Einar Partners on demystifying health log analytics and predictive AiOps. And it's the first really ever expert panel of us organizing this. And we are thrilled to have you here today. And over the next hour, we will discuss this exciting topic on leveraging AI and analytics for log analytics and how to transform IT operations with it, as it can have an immense impact on how you manage your IT operations. And so let's get started with it. And for people who don't know me, my name is Akif Basser, and I'm the R&D lead at Einar Partners Research Unit, R&D lead on AiOps and data science. And I'm your host today. I will moderate the panel discussions. And very briefly about me, I have keen interest and passion in AI and data science. And I love to create industry-wide benchmarks for ITOM and AiOps solutions. Of course, I'm not alone today. I have two great co-hosts with me who have extensive experience in implementing and even designing log analytics solutions. So Alexander Acker and Ash Poxton with me. So could you please introduce yourselves?
Of course. Ash, do you want to start or should I?
Now I'll let you. You're first on the list, so yeah, you go first.
All right. Thank you, Aki. Thank you a lot. Thanks very much to having me here. My name is Alexander Acker. What I'm doing, we founded the company a few years ago, helping our customers to establish actually log analytics. We mainly focus on customers that do not have any kind of log management or log analytics yet, and basically guiding them through the journey of setting it up, how to set it up, what are common pitfalls to be aware of, and how to end up with an log analytics solution that is actually helping the specific business of our customer at the end. And yeah, a little bit background about me. I did my PhD in this area where I researched basically different machine learning and AI methods on top of telemetry data of software systems. And one telemetry data type, obviously, as you know, is log data, and therefore, yeah, that was what caught my interest, and I tend to stick with it. Yeah.
Nice, great to have you.
Thanks.
And Ash, who are you?
Yeah, I ask myself that question every day. So Ashley Poxton, I'm the domain architect for digital operations at National Grid. I've been with National Grid 6 years coming up to. And for people that don't know what National Grid do, we are a UK and US business, and we're in the utilities industry. We generally provide gas and electricity either through transmission or in the US through retail as well. Digital operations are a function within global technology operations where we have a responsibility across CMDB discovery through to observability, through to AI, and also finally automation. It's a new function within inside National Grid. We've been running for about 2 years now, so we've literally had to design it from the bottom up. And observability is probably one of the observability in AI is probably one of the big things, because it's quite new to a lot of people in National Grid, and it's definitely new to a lot of the legacy applications and infrastructure that we've got knocking around. So it means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and it's interesting, how systems are built without observability and how they've survived in a digital world without observability or log analytics being around. I don't know how some of these systems have carried on working, but yeah, we're going to fix that now.
Nice. Yeah, very interesting, and would love to. We will hear that more about later in the session. And we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's set the stage for today's panel discussion and what you can expect to learn. During this discussion, like what you just mentioned, that your journey and your experience with log analytics for the health of your IT systems, we will touch upon that and what value it brings to IT organizations. So we will first kickstart the panel discussion with that, your log analytics journey, also your journey, Alexander, how what value it brings from your perspective to IT organizations. It's always good to touch upon that aspect when you consider to implement log analytics. And of course, we will touch upon what the capabilities of log analytics are, and also on how to act on these predictions, like the idea of having predictive intelligence, how it impacts the IT organization's operating model, and also to further, for those who are more interested in log analytics and how to optimize their experience with it, we will also touch upon how to select or what data sources to select to ingest in the log analytics. Very briefly, that being said, I also want to note that this panel discussions will be recorded and published later on our YouTube channel. And to further set expectations for the audience, it will be mainly a deep dive sessions, kind of a guide on the, like I mentioned earlier, on the AiOps HLA journey. It will be mainly, like you already dropped observability, so it will be mainly on the observability side of things, and it won't be focused. The discussions won't be focused on technical configurations or complex formulas behind HLA, and also the discussions are targeted for people who have never worked before with log analytics, as well as to people who have already implemented or using log analytics and are curious to optimize their experience with it. And there's one thing though I want to mention. We are assuming that the audience know the very basic concepts of AiOps and observability, like what log data are and how it's being analyzed. But with that being said, before I give the stage to you, Alex and Ash, I want to mention that the essence of log analytics, correct me if I'm wrong, Alexander, it's making sense of complexity and madness. And also the discussions I had before with you, Ash, you have large volumes of log data, millions from various data sources, and also different monitoring tools. And we try to make sense of that with a set of algorithms, of AI machine learning algorithms in an analytics engine. And then we hope to target or have an outcome where we can reduce the downtime, have a faster root cause analysis, reduce mean time to recover and noise. But more importantly, also to prevent incidents and critical outages. That's also very important. And I think you will tell more about that, what your experience are, Ash and Alex. And at the end, have also deeper insight in your IT systems and applications and services, of course. That all being said, it's finding this magic in the brave new world of AI, let's say. With that being said, I want to give the stage to what your journey and what your experiences are, Ash and Alexander. Maybe starting with Ash, with you.
Yeah, we can do. Sure.
Yeah.
So almost a year ago, just over a year ago, we had a customer of ours internally at National Grid come to us with a complex problem. They were the product team for a website, an external facing website, which serves millions of customers in the US. And their complex problem was that was a distributed system. They had between 8 and 14 different log sources. So if there was an issue with, let's just say, payment or billing inquiry or account lookup, they wouldn't always know where that problem was or what the root cause could potentially be. And given it's a distributed system, we'd have to stand up a war room of 8 to 10 developers or engineers to go and investigate all of their logs for their respective systems. It's all in a little black box siloed data repository. It might be sitting on the server, it might be in a repository that they have access to, but nobody else does. The product team asked us, can we aggregate these logs into a central location and search them? So an engineer from, let's just say, the API team can search the logs across all the systems easily and find correlation and causation by aggregating the logs. That led us down the path of using ServiceNow Health Log Analytics. And there was a bit of infrastructure that needed to be stood up first. So as you know, you need to deploy ServiceNow mid servers to ingest the logs. And we effectively took the 8 data sources, ingested them into ServiceNow HLA, and I think we're streaming something like 12 million log lines of data every day into ServiceNow HLA. And what that has meant for the product team is that they now get alerts or incidents based on anomalies that the product is detecting. If we look at what happened before that, and on the slide previously, we talked about reducing the noise. Them engineers were getting thousands of emails a day to sift through. And if you're getting thousands of emails a day, what do you generally do? You ignore them and wait until somebody screams and says there's a problem. So you automatically remove that proactive monitoring, because who wants to look at, you've got your normal emails as well as these alerts coming through. So out of the thousands of emails engineers used to receive every day, we now have alert mechanisms in ServiceNow, and we're down to tens of alerts that are significant. So we reduced the noise, and we're now just looking at significant alerts that happen in that system. What that's really meant for us is not only are we getting alerts, but we can also look at trends and analysis. So we know if there's a signal going off in one system, that could have an impact further up the chain or down the chain, which could cause an incident and an outage. By making them alerts become surfaced to the right people at the right time, and we're not doing these war rooms, we're able to react to early signals to prevent incidents from occurring. That's been evident because even over the last 6 months, the team have been able to prevent priority incidents from occurring by looking at these alerts that have been generated. That effectively is helping our customers have better trust, and National Grid's reputation is maintained. People can go and pay the bills a lot easier. There's no downtime. The engineers and developers can now focus that time on innovating the product rather than trying to firefight and fix things that have gone wrong elsewhere. If we talk about the journey, I'm not sure if we want to touch on this later, but and Alexander might attest to this as well. One of the biggest challenges I found our developers engineers faced was the logs weren't always constructed in a way that made health log analytics applicable. There was a lot of rewriting of logs, changing the logs. inserting correlation IDs. There was even some spelling mistakes in some of the logs where correlation was spelt with just one R rather than two, yet the other system had it with two Rs. There's been a lot of redesigning how the logs are implemented and constructed. So HLA is not a silver bullet that's going to fix all of your logging problems. So let's just be clear about that to start with, because it's not. You've still got to do the groundwork first. You've got to make sure the logs are in a readable format, that they can be ingested. And also, log shipping is a big factor, because you might have a legacy system that hasn't got a log shipping method. So it might be sitting in, I don't know, the root of a folder on the E drive or the D drive. Well, how do you get that log into Health Log Analytics? You can deploy agents, obviously, like the agent client collector for logging from ServiceNow, or you can use other methods. But you have to plan that and architect it correctly to make sure, A, you're shipping the logs, B, the amount of logs that you are shipping are sized correctly for the platform you want to ingest them into. And then secondly, is the data that you're gathering actually usable? I don't know if Alex wants to add anything onto that, but it's not a silver bullet. You've still got to make sure your engineers and developers. And what we did, we actually ended up writing guardrails and principles so that if they're bringing up new products, the developers engineers know the guardrails they need to work in, they know the log formats that they need to adhere to, they know that they need to be shipped to a central repository. And that could go to, for example, Azure Log Analytics first, and then from there it can go to ServiceNow, or it could go to Splunk, it could go to wherever you want to, as long as it's accessible via your AI or Health Log Analytics platform, then you should be okay. But yes, there's a lot of lessons learned in there.
Yeah. Great. We will delve more into that later in the discussions.
And just one of the biggest things as well, I guess, is the user adoption. I think we'll get onto that a bit later as well. But getting teams to change their operational behaviors and practices to now not sit there looking at folders full of logs, to just wait for the alerts and instance. It's a big cultural change that isn't always to explain how you do it.
Exactly, and actually kind of trying to predict whether there's a problem or issue. That's the magic, kind of tough mentioned earlier. So great insights, and thank you for sharing that. So how about you, Alex? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, there's the insights were very interesting, Ash, and I think I'll probably repeat a few things that you said already, because they're on point. That's exactly. It also fits, I would say, our experiences that we had with our customers. It's very similar, a lot of similarities there. But maybe before we start before I start to explain the log analytics journey, a few words of caution, maybe, because I'm from the customers that we work with, you can expect that they are rather startups. Basically, we focus on Series A, Series B, basically companies that are just establishing log management and log analytics in their systems, because the systems probably grew so large that they're not able to handle them anymore by manual analysis or manual review of logs, and therefore they're now decided to switch to a more structured way of analyzing logs and establish observability in their system. Therefore, probably the things that I will say are a little bit biased towards that, but as I said, there are definitely intersections between what you said, Ash, and the things that we learned so far. Maybe, Aki, can you switch the slide? Then
yes, of course.
Just a few things that I learned when approaching these companies that never did anything with logs or structured log analysis beforehand. They saw that there's a lot of potential with log analytics, and the benefits, they sound really good, really nice, and they would like to have it, right? But then of course, from technical perspective and from process perspective, when you want to set it up correctly, right, you need to do a lot of homework. You need to cover a lot of things, prepare a lot of things before you actually can establish log analytics. And this is what I summarized here with log management. And whenever we start to explain what's needed in order to have log analytics, then people are not that that euphorical anymore as previously. So let's switch again, Akif.
Yes.
Yeah, and therefore I try to analyze, or try to, from my experience, to digest or distill a little bit 3 major challenges that we face when talking with customers when they want to establish log analytics. Next slide, please. Yeah, and the first one is basically the convincing, right? So their technical team, and they would like to establish log analytics because they are not able to handle the complexity of the current system anymore by hand, and therefore they need some structured way to do it. But of course, they need to convince the management layer, right, the business layer, and therefore the convincing argument there is always usually return of investment. If I, as a company, would establish now log analytics, log management, what's the expected return of investment for that in 1 year, 2 years, whenever? And this is very difficult to estimate actually for log management. And there I try to propose it to 4 examples where we see that return on investment can be calculated, but it's still difficult. The most or the left part is security compliance. This is the easiest way to do it, right? Because whenever there are certain regulations that a company must follow, also regarding log analytics and log management, then there's no clear argument for return of investment, because if it's an official regulation, then you either comply or you're out of business. And this is the easiest part. For us, this is usually out of scope because, as I said, we usually work with younger, smaller companies, and there are not that many compliances that they need to fulfill. But usually for them, the other 3 are more important. The second part is the improvement of productivity. Right. So whenever you establish log analytics, you will probably, or the team, your operations team or site reliability engineering team, will spend less time on troubleshooting. You will be able to do the work, or whenever problems occur, you will be able to solve them faster. However, just establishing log analytics and log management, for example, with a platform, you, Ash, mentioned ServiceNow. There are several others there as well, also open source solution. It probably won't improve the productivity of your team immediately. You will probably need to first teach the people and to onboard the teams on how to actually use the new tool sets. They need to be integrated in the daily workflows, and this takes time. And as Ash said perfectly, it's a cultural change. You will need to use these tools, or the teams need to use these tools in order to get the benefits out of it. And therefore, even if this succeeds, right, even if you are able to improve, then with regard to the return of investment, you will need to do some decisions. You will either need smaller team sizes in order to manage your infrastructure, which will save you costs, or you can reutilize the manpower that is now available to do something new, more innovations in your company. In there, again, it's for every business and for every customer, the calculation of the return of investment in that area is different. So there's no common formula that you can apply in order to calculate it. The other 2 parts, the improvement of SLIs, I put here also SLIs. Probably everybody is aware probably of SLAs, right? Service level agreements. With our customers, we are usually working with SLIs because whenever your system faces end customers, like a web service or some app that you're providing to your customers, then you're not agreeing on certain SLAs. But your the health of your service will impact the user in a certain way, right? And SLAs in this area are indicators that are indicating the health of the service that the consumer, the customer of the services actually care about, not the inner workings, which is very important for us to distinguish. And there, when we improve these kind of SLIs, of course, we can reduce, for example, the downtime of our service or improve the mean time to repair whenever service level indicators are degraded. But here, if we want to calculate the return of investment, we would need to know the cost that, for example, downtimes produce. For bigger companies, probably there are such calculations, but the customers that we are working with, usually they don't have this kind of insights. They don't know what will happen when their service is not available for 1 or 2 hours. So they don't exactly know the costs of that. And therefore, the calculation then when reducing these kind of times is difficult. And the last part, which I personally like most, is the release with confidence. So whenever you develop your service, when our customers are improving their products, improving their apps and web services, they still, I would say, they still struggle with releases. So whenever something needs to be released, it's difficult because it might break something, it might cause impact on your SLIs. And with log analytics, it's possible to verify that your new version or the new feature that you introduced in your software will actually behave as it should in production. So you can do smaller and faster releases and reduce the time to market. And here, the calculation of return of investment is easier because usually it's very important for our customers to be the first on the market and to push features as fast as possible to the market. And this will, or log analytics usually enables that.
Indeed, and the downtime cost was estimated by Gartner at like $100,000
exactly
an hour. Like can be very expensive.
Yeah, you're right. However, for these are more or less averages, right? So
yes.
whenever we approach a customer, then we need to take a look at the specifics of this customer and then calculate that there. The second challenge, which I would briefly mention, is that the log management itself has a very, very bad total cost of ownership scaling. So here it's a very rough formula that I basically took from Ben Singelman. He's a former Google employee and now has a startup on traces and log analytics. And here the calculation is for logs is approximately the transaction rate. So whenever your software is doing something, right, and it's doing something when there are user requests fired against your application or against your web service. And this is basically the transaction rate. So when your amount of user grows in your system, then the transaction rate grows as well. Then the number of services, you will probably push new features to your service and your system will grow. And this is where the number of services will grow. Then you have the costs of the network and the storage of the log messages and the retention period, how long the logs should be actually stored. And this costs a lot of money. And whenever you, for example, you want your system to grow, right? You want more users, you want additional features. But on the other hand, it will cause additional costs with your log management. And therefore, it's very important to know this beforehand and to prepare accordingly. I will mention a few specific things in the next slide. I give when you switch. Yeah, and this is basically where I would highlight the complexity of log management and log analytics, all the steps that needs to be done in order to come up or to end up with a good log analysis. And it starts right at the beginning, right at the left part, actually the source code. So we're working usually with companies that are developing services themselves and they have in-house developer teams. And this is where the journey starts. So a developer needs to write good log statements in the code in order for the logs to be analyzed later in the log analytics system. And Ash mentioned it as well, right? Here we need to be careful when we do when we select the log format. We need to unify it across our teams in the company. We have the log granularity, so when to put log messages in the code and which events should be logged and which not. We have the message semantic. Is the log message actually explaining the problem correctly, or am I not able to get any information out of the log messages? That is a typical thing that we see often. The next part, Ash mentioned as well already, is how to gather these logs from the system. So we have the scraping at the beginning. So how to get logs from a software into our log management system. We need to decide on scraping intervals, how to filter them, how to do the parsing right at the beginning, probably, how to do the batching in order to reduce the amount of requests to our log management system, and also the contextualization. This is a very important part, because we will probably, it's easy to gather log messages from each individual service, but how to make how to establish connections between the log messages in a distributed system. This is a very hard thing to do, and it's challenging. And the last, the second part, of course, is the log storage. So how do we compress there? Do we do some kind of filtering and parsing there? We probably need to do some format conversion, because we always need to deal with some kind of legacy systems in our environment. There we need to convert older log formats to new ones, and also to decide on the retention. And finally, after we establish these 3 steps, we will end up with some kind of log analytics, where we are able to analyze the log message through some kind of anomaly detection or machine learning model training to visualize causality and correlation between log messages, and to be able finally to gain the benefits out of it. So basically reduce the mean time to repair.
So yeah, I think we can agree that log analytics, the journey, it's very extensive and comprehensive and kind of difficult, complex journey. So
Alex, sorry, on the bit about the ingesting of data, I was with a particular vendor earlier last week, actually, because I was highlighting the costs of ingesting terabytes of data into a log analytics platform. Obviously, it's quite expensive. Maybe you get hit twice by it. You get hit by the vendor that you want to ingest your logs to, because they'll have a storage cost, and you might also get hit by the egress charges from let's say Azure Log Analytics. They don't let you take the data out for free. What some vendors are now looking at is how can they just create an API into an existing log repository and just view the logs and apply their calculations and metrics without actually having to ingest the logs into the data platform, which I think is quite a good way. It'd be a good selling point for a log analytics company. So you don't need to stream the logs to or ingest the logs to your log analytics platform. The log analytics platform can actually view them in the repository that they sit in. For example, it could be Azure Log Analytics, it could be AWS, it could be MuleSoft, it could be wherever your product is already shipping its logs to. And I think that's a great way forward for it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So basically, all the customers that we are currently talking to are complaining, or one point of complaining is the cost, basically, right? So how to decide which logs to forward and which logs to store, and how long the retention period should be. I would say there are 2 aspects. One aspect is, are there regulations to store log messages? Because if the company needs to comply with certain regulations, then there's no way around storing most of the log messages for a certain amount of time, right? We're working with a lot of customers that are not, or they do not need to do it, but still they're doing it because they're having this kind of fear of missing out. So when something happens, what happens if I don't have the required information? This can be tackled, or we are actually looking into that at the moment, is how to filter log messages right at the beginning. So storing only the log messages that are indeed relevant and reducing redundancy. So there, the first step that we're doing is basically to look at redundant information and store redundant information in a way that it's not storing all the log messages, but only the ones that contain the information once. This is one part. And the other part you mentioned as well is what about the analytics? And there, I would say it depends a little bit on the solution that is applied. When there are certain vendors out there, they provide both, right? They provide log storage and log analytics at the same time. And there it's I would say it's not too much of an issue. You will store the log messages with these vendors. You will do analytics inside of these systems, and then you won't have additional costs of sending the log message to an external analytics system. However, there are also the possibility where you, for example, store your logs in an S3 bucket in AWS, right? And then you would like to forward these log messages to a log analytics platform in order to gain insights. And this is the case that you mentioned, as I understood. There, in my opinion, or the approach that we thought about there is, again, some kind of filtering. So without, or to not have the requirement to send all the log messages from an S3 bucket to the log analytics platform, but only the ones that are relevant for a certain incident.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think, let's continue first.
Yeah. No, actually, you already kind of kickstarted the panel discussion, because the first question or the topic theme I wanted to ask was, how can we determine golden valuable log data to ingest into the log analytics or the health log analytics and data selection approaches? But we kind of already touched upon that. And because you also, Ash, mentioned that you selected, for example, 8 data sources. And Alexander, you also mentioned the cost of log management, storage, and the cost, the more you choose. Then I want to ask, like, since you can, how can we select the valuable log data, the sources? Do you have your own maybe approaches developed, kind of methodologies or frameworks, or do you have kind of rules or I don't know, to make the trade-off, which data to select and ingest and which not?
I think for us, we're probably not as advanced as selecting golden data, valuable data. If I give one example, out of them 12 or 14 million log lines of data, not all of them are going to be golden or valuable that get ingested every day. Because there's so much data there, to identify what's golden and what's the most valuable is, it's a big task. And that's just on one system. If we were to roll this out enterprise-wide, because we've only done it to one system at the minute, it's an interesting thought. How do you identify it? And we haven't got a formula for it at the minute. What we do is we work with the product team to say, okay, just an example, what API do you need to be made aware of? And then we'll put filters into our analytics engine to say, if this API raises an event, then you need to make sure that they get alerted. Everything else is just complementary. I mean, we even ingest informational logs as well, just so we've got the complete picture. We don't have a formula. Alex probably has, because he's far more knowledgeable on this than what any of us are. But yeah, at the minute, I still call us, we're an adolescent when it comes to log analytics. We've gone past the baby years. We're not quite a mature adult just yet, but we're going along the journey. And any help you've got on that, Alex, we appreciate it.
I mean, Ash, there are very interesting insights. What I would ask is, for example, when you do this kind of analytics part, do you continuously analyze your log message stream, or do you do it on demand when let's say critical events occur, or like you mentioned, right, when a certain API is raising an event, then you start the log analytics? Yeah.
Oh, it's continually running. So in our platform, it's obviously looking for anomalies from
I see.
expected patterns. So
Yeah.
it's continually running 24/7, 365.
Okay, I see.
It needs some also days of data, like or volumes of data to at some point produce good results. Also needs the training period.
Exactly.
I see. Okay, because yeah, for us, I would draw maybe a slightly different picture here, Akif, if you don't mind.
No.
What we're usually implementing is an approach that is not continuously analyzing log messages, but we first of all define some kind of golden signals for our customers. So these are basically signals or metrics that are facing the customer and which are defined as SLAs or SLIs. And this is where we run an analysis 24/7 all the time. So a certain endpoint, for example, needs to answer within 50 milliseconds. So this would be a very clear requirement. And if it doesn't answer, then an alarm will be raised. Whenever violations of SLAs or SLIs occur, this is the point where we trigger the analytics of logs on demand. So then we go into the log storage system and try to identify all the relevant log messages for the violation of a certain SLA and SLI. And we do more sophisticated analysis than only on these logs, and then present the results to the operations team or a certain developer team that are responsible for a certain service. And then they can figure out what actually happened, why this violation of an SLI or SLA occurred. This is our approach. Maybe to have, or my answer to this question is how to determine golden and valuable log messages it's about contextualization, because log messages itself, they not always contain the information that is relevant for the product itself, right? That has some kind of business value behind it. So what will happen, for example, if there are log messages that should not be there? I mean, at the end, if the customer is not affected, I don't care too much. So it's fine, they can be there. But again, here I would say it's the perspective of us, because we usually don't deal with very critical infrastructure. What might be something different for you, Ash? When you deal with critical infrastructures, that might be a different story.
With that approach, though, Alex, do you miss out on them early signals that might be a warning that something is creepy? If you're only going after the golden signals, let's say, let's just say it doesn't breach an SLI. So let's say a SQL server normally has, I don't know, 500 connections to it, and all of a sudden you only see on a particular time on a particular day, there's only 50. Now that might not breach an SLI, but for us, that's an early signal that something's not quite right. There's no impact yet, but we want that early signal that says, beware guys, this isn't what we normally see on this time of day. Go and have a look, and it raises the alert to whatever resolver team it needs before it even impacts on the application or the product.
That's a very good point. I mean, if it's possible to identify such patterns or such signals very precisely, then we tend to also set them up as early indicators. But here I would say there's a trade-off, right, between specificity and generality, right? So do you want to take a look at everything and be notified about any deviations from a certain normal state?
Yep.
This tends to be rather or more expensive and also sometimes error prone, because you have a lot of false alarms there, as you mentioned as well during at the beginning. Or do you know, or you learned about your system in a way that you know the critical business processes and also critical execution paths through your distributed system? And then you can set up these kind of probes that are monitoring the golden signals or early indicators as well, and you will be only notified if they are violated. Yeah.
Great. And by the way, for the audience, there's a Q&A box where you can submit your questions for the panel or your thoughts and ideas, so we can have a good discussion and engaging discussion with you. But for this question, I don't see any questions from the audience. But the greater insight in data selection approaches, like really great to know and hear about, especially the early signals you mentioned, like creating patterns. That's really the essence of the log analytics. Like, it's really great to hear and know. So I will then go to our second question, or the theme for today. Because as you, I got actually a question from the audience right when I went to the next one. So the first question is, if it's an application, then log only from application would suffice, or you have to take logs from application as well? And the second question is maybe more related to this question. But yeah, for the question from the audience, it's whether the log is only from application would be enough, or would it have to take logs from applications, database, etc. as well?
I don't know if you want me to go first on give our experience of what we do. So we take logs from the application, the infrastructure, the network, anything. So we typically service map our applications and products, and we understand the upstream impacts and the downstream impacts from a technology level, technical component level. So if there is a switch or a router or a database, it might be a shared database that impacts our application or product, we want the logs from that as well. Now, the application team might not be interested in them logs to the level they would be their own ones. But what we do is, if that technical component is showing errors or warnings or critical issues, we want the application team to be aware of it as a customer, not as somebody who's got to go and resolve anything. And that's because we don't want it, they might see as what I call a symptom in their application. They haven't got an error. Well, they have got an error, but they haven't got something to go and fix, because the issue is further downstream on a shared resource. But we want them to know, yes, there is an impact on your application. You don't need to resolve anything, so don't get a war room. Don't all jump onto the application trying to work out what the problem is. We already know about it because we've took the logs from the other technical components, and that resolver team's already dealing with it. Alex, I don't know if you want to add anything from your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. The challenge, I would maybe highlight a specific challenge there, is to basically establish then at some point the correlation, right? You have the application logs on the application layer, and you have the logs from properly managed systems like a database or a message queue, and then you have also probably logs from the servers as well, from the infrastructure. And now the question is how to make some kind of connection between, let's say, a certain execution inside of the application, what are the logs that were produced when this was done? What are the logs that were produced when a certain message at the end was written to the message queue? What kind of logs were produced at that time at the bottom at the infrastructure? I mean, you need these kind of information, as you said. You need them in order to establish correlation, causality, in order to pinpoint then the root cause actually of a problem. Yeah.
Great. And as we have great discussions, time flies, and I have to be also mindful of time. There's another question regarding this, but maybe we can answer it at the end. And we still have two kind of questions themes to go on. Let me ask you this question: like, how does health log analytics impact the operating models of IT organizations? And this is more on once you implement, like what Ash mentioned. So our team has more time to innovate product, and I will be very interested in what that would mean or how that goes. And also, Alex, you also said like increase of productivity. So once log analytics is implemented, so I want to delve more into that. And for that, we have, let's say, 5 minutes, kind of. And there's also a question from the audience. Yeah, let me first ask you, Ash and Alex, how does it impact the IT organizations and maybe even your organization?
I'll let you go first this time, Alex.
All right. Yeah. I mean, yes, to make it short, or I try to make it short. Usually what we can observe is that the team starts to work more, let's say, agile, or if there is a certain DevOps culture already implemented in the company, then establishing log analytics strengthens this cultural aspect, because at some point, when you take a look at the logs that are ingested in a log analytics system, they need to be written in a good way. They need to be contain all the information that is actually needed later to identify the root cause of a problem. And therefore, there's a certain awareness between a developer that actually writes a log statement, and then this developer will later see, oh, my logs are actually helping the team to pinpoint problems in the system, which is which closes, I would say, the gap and lets the teams cooperate more closely together. And the other part is things become more agile, right? So when you have a structured log analytics, you can establish also verification of your feature releases. You can establish a verification of your tests that are running in your infrastructure, which will boost the confidence in releasing new things into your productive environment.
Oh, great. So also more collaboration between teams, you say?
Yeah.
So I have a slightly different twist on it. How it impacts operate. If I think about, to start with, there is a significant amount of effort needed by the operations teams to understand, are the logs significant, mark them as significant so that when they do occur, you get an alert or an incident raised. So there is a bit of training of the machine learning algorithm inside your analytics platform, and that can take a little bit of time. So people need to be aware that they need to put the effort in to train the system, because an analytics platform isn't going to know what an API 50 millisecond means to whether it's normal or not. They need to be trained on this is significant, this is not significant, etc., etc.
Yeah.
If I think a little bit further along that line, what I would like to see happen, it's a vision some of my colleagues inside National Grid also share, is once we've got the system trained to know what's significant and what isn't, then can we apply automation to go and enhance the alert by getting additional information, doing self-healing, remove that level 1 or tier 1 triaging that's normally done by a human, and allow them people to potentially be trained to be a tier 2 or a tier 3 and go and build their career and gain their additional knowledge to better themselves. The laborious tier one stuff, we can use the automation tools to do that kind of work and allow our colleagues and our teams to grow and enhance themselves and work on things that are probably more attractive rather than just going to get additional information for a log or an incident. Then you become a much more leaner, agile operations team, because you've not got to have 50 people looking at alerts that are coming in. You now have a leaner, more agile team of maybe 20 highly skilled, productive, that can go and innovate the product. They can spend more time engineering rather than just analyzing logs. Let the automation, let the computer do the boring work, and then you can build a really good, strong team of highly skilled people.
Indeed. And from the audience, we had somebody asked, so do we need to set up a dedicated ops analytic team for faster, better results then? So what would you say?
So I would say, yes, to start with, in the early part of it, you need the teams. You need to have the team stood up to be able to put the effort into, so the machine can understand what's significant and then isn't. But after that, so you kind of want to get away from somebody sitting there looking at screens, looking at dashboards, waiting for things to go red. What you want is, Alex mentioned it earlier, a DevOps team who are developing and enhancing the product, and then respond to the operation side of it when an alert is made that's significant. So I wouldn't say an ops analytics team. You just want a DevOps team who can do both. Alex, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, it summarizes it perfectly. I mean, yeah, as I said, you need some kind of transition period, right, to get your team from a current status to basically embrace the benefits of log analytics.
Great. I hope that answers the question. I have to be mindful of time as we are approaching the end. So, we had great discussions, and let's say I'm really excited to implement log analytics solution or health log analytics from and start this journey at my organization. So what would then be the optimal health log analytics journey, and how can we build a great business case and roadmap? And to be mindful of the time, I would say, can you briefly give maybe a strategy to pursue, tips, guides, way to the point? So if someone decides to join this journey, follow this journey as you pursued and followed.
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, yeah. If I start, Joseph, I try to again keep it short. What I observed when we talked with customers is it is really helpful at some point to be precisely aware of what you would like to achieve when you establish log analytics, right? Because when you take a look at different companies, there are different objectives, and so the first question would be, is log analytics even the right way to achieve these objectives? That's the first part. And the second part is, if you are understanding at the end the values and the benefits that you would like to achieve with log analytics, then you would need to lay out the path towards it. So, which kind of log management, as I mentioned, right? It's a boring thing to do usually for companies, but it needs to be done. It needs to be done in a good way in order to get the most out of the log analytics part. Whenever thinking about log analytics, you need to think about how to actually collect the data, to process the data, to make this data available. Without it, it will be difficult to have a good analytics part. And if you do all of these things right at the end, it's then you can draw all the benefits from log analytics.
Nice.
I'll just say that there won't be an end. You will always be on this journey.
Yeah.
There'll always be
hopefully there won't be an end. Yeah, for us.
You'll always be iterating, you'll always be enhancing, you'll always be tweaking things. There'll be new logs that need to be onboarded. There'll be new dashboards that somebody asks for. So it isn't a start and finish like a typical project is, or a typical program of work. It's an operations function. You've got to treat it as this is your day-to-day activity. You're not always, it's always going to be there. There's always going to be something to do on the platform. One, I know we're running out of time, Akif, but I would say, bear in mind your security teams and your SOC, because you might already be collecting a lot of the data that you need for operational analytics. And bear in mind that at some point in your journey of log analytics, do you need to combine your operational data with your security data? So don't always think you have to have two separate products. If you can use the same product, use the same product. You can do different things with the data. You can slice it, put it into different domains. You can make sure that people can only see what they need to see. I would work with your security teams to see how you can leverage what they're already getting.
Yeah, indeed. So, like, it's a good point you mentioned, security. It's always good to have good communication or have friends with the security. Be really good friends with the security team. That's as we had discovered too. Like the reason of, for example, with ServiceNow ITOM projects when implementing, its security factor was very dominant in that. So, yeah,
I could agree with that.
Great.
Yeah.
There is there any question from the audience? There is one very specific question. Maybe we can answer that when once we finish these discussions. But furthermore, I don't see any other questions coming up from the audience. I think we can wrap up today's discussions. Yeah, where to go from here? Well, this panel, expert panel, is recorded, so it will be published later on our YouTube channel. And yeah, we can find it on our website too, and also book a strategy session. But I want to really thank you, Alex, Ash, for your great discussions, for the great insights you shared, the knowledge you shared. It was really great to have you and host you, and amazing to talk about the log analytics. And I mentioned always, like, it's a journey, because there's no end. There's maybe a beginning, but there might not be an end. But it was really great to have you. Thank you so much. And thank you for the audience for participating in this panel and discussions. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was useful, and take the insights here. So yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Thank you, Aki, for having me. It was great.
Yeah, 1 hour was not enough. Who knows? Maybe at some point in a second follow up. Who knows? Okay. Let's see.
All right.
Okay. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.